Excellent. Okay, so there'll be a few stragglers just coming in, but I'll just start by introducing myself. So my name's Ann Stanley. I'm the founder and CEO of Annika Digital. I've been in digital marketing for over 20 years, and Annika's 16 years old, and we actually have a stand over there, A50, where you can pick up my book, latest book, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about in this seminar now. So I won't bore you too much with this slide, but one of the things I did want to raise with you is the fact that we run a free webinar nearly every Friday. We've been doing this since before COVID, and there's about 150 webinars there that you can go and have a look at any time. You just have to log in and help yourself. So please go and help yourself to those resources. I've got a lot of slides to get through. I thought we were going to have 45 minutes, and we've only got 25, so I've had to condense it a little bit. So I'm going to go quite fast. So apologies to anybody that English isn't their first language. There's a marketing apocalypse coming. Or it's on its way, or it's already here, depending on how you want to view it. Marketing's got very, very exciting in the last 12 months. And I think we've been looking to get ready for GA4 for over 18 months. And we're having people now coming to us saying, can you set up our GA4, please? And their own accounts have already finished tracking in July. And does anybody like GA4? Does anybody? No, it's not very nice to use, is it? And most of you will probably find you haven't set it up properly either, and that's quite worrying because you're not going to see the same data. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on GA4 because I think if you don't get that right, you won't be able to measure anything, and you'll find that a lot of things won't be working properly. The other big changes relate to privacy and cookies, and this really started with iOS 14 from Apple about 3 years ago. And suddenly Facebook and all the mobile apps couldn't get any data anymore because everybody said, no, I don't want to share my data. And so there's been a lot of talk in the last 12 months about conversion API. Has anybody heard of conversion APIs? Yeah, you see now I've got more nods on this than I did in the other talk. So it's good to know that some of you know what conversion API is. Okay, let me ask you another question. How many of you are doing paid social ads? Okay, well the guys that hadn't put their hand up the first time, you definitely need to understand what's going on with server-side tracking and conversion APIs. It's going to be critical, but it also means that stuff that didn't work before because Facebook didn't have the data, suddenly you can get the conversion data in from your website and make campaigns work again. It's amazing. The other thing that's been happening a lot is automation by the bidding platforms. It's been happening behind the scenes. Google particularly has moved really fast on this with Performance Max. So if any of you have got Performance Max ads running, you know that they can be really nightmare to run. Lots of settings that you don't realize, and Google will auto-generate videos from you from the rubbish ads, images. You never wanted them to create this video, and they'll do that. And the problem with that is, as they go more and more to automation, what happens is it becomes a level playing field to the bottom. So you really have to know what you're doing. You have to use remarketing strategies, first-party data to make improvements. So you need to know about that. And then, of course, you can't go to a conference without mentioning ChatGPT. This book, which I wrote over Christmas, took me a week with the help of ChatGPT. I knew what I wanted to say, but I'm not that good at writing. I'm a techie. I'm good at spreadsheets. So 80 pages is quite difficult to write if you're not a brilliant writer. And so with its assistance, I was able to turn something that would take me a month into a week, which was quite a result. It took 6 months to design it and edit it, but only a week to write it, which is a bit ironic, really. So there's loads of tools and there's loads of changes, which is going to have a big impact on our jobs. And we're using automation all over the place within our agency, and also you can use those in-house. So let's have a look at some of the things we need to be concerned about. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about GA4 migrations. Some of you may be very happy with your GA4 migration, but actually it's when you go into the configuration, you realize that you've not set it up in the best way. I also want to talk to you about server-side tracking and conversion APIs. I think this is going to be really important going forward. There are some off-the-shelf products that can make this a lot easier to do. So if you haven't done it already, you need to be getting ready, because next year Google's talking about basically retiring cookies from Chrome. So it's a bit like GA4, you need to be doing it now, not in a year's time. And then the final thing I wanted to talk to you about was a bit on the ads automation. So first of all, GA4 migration and customization. So on the 1st of July, in theory, GA3 or Universal Analytics, to put it properly, stopped processing data. Now that's not true. I've got 50% of my accounts, I'm still getting data. Fortunately, because some of them, the GA4 is not working. This is clients' accounts and people we're auditing. So GA4 will be the only platform you can use, but it may have created you a GA4 automatically, and if it did, because they threatened that everything would be automatically swapped over, you'll find that your settings are not right. So I'm going to give you a little flow diagram showing you where you might be in that journey. There's still time to customize your GA4 account, and I suggest you do it as soon as possible. And I'm going to give you a link to a webinar where we spent a whole hour just on that part, because I can't cover that in 20 minutes. But the other important thing is you've only got a year until July next year to be able to access your historical data. So a lot of the work that I've been doing is bringing my historical data into things like, or our team have been doing, is bringing historical data into BigQuery, but also creating Looker Studio reports, which used to be called Data Studio, so you can see the overlap between the GA3 data and the GA4, because they are not the same, and sometimes they can be out by 10 or 20%. So you really need to know what's happening now versus what was before, because when you report and say, oh, my Google ads or my my Facebook ads were doing this, and now it's doing 20% less, and you've changed nothing, somebody's going to be, what the hell's going on? Okay, so you need to be really aware of that. So I thought the easiest way of starting was just to show you what should have happened versus what might have happened and what you might have to fix. So if you did this properly, you would have had your old GA3, I'll just call it GA3, but universal account, and you would have manually done the setup, you would have configured it properly, you would have gone through to the settings, and you would have customized it all and got all the right settings. And what we've done in the webinar is gone through all the settings you need, and I've just picked out a couple of samples today. Now what's more likely to have happened is that the GA4 account might have been automatically set up, and that would have probably happened using the setup assistant, which you can get to in the settings, which I'll show you in a second. And then you would have automatically configured it, and you might have completely screwed it up because you would have brought in a load of rubbish that was in GA3, goals that aren't there anymore, that were converted to events and audiences that you don't use, and it will be a right mess. And so what you really need to do is go in and manually configure it and manually change the settings. So even if you did it automatically, it's not too late to fix it. And then the final thing that will happen is you could have set it up completely independently, and what you'll notice is it's not linked to your original account. So you can still go in and link it to an account using that setup assistant. And the setup assistant is actually really easy to use. When we were doing GA4 migrations 12 months ago, it didn't exist, so it's much easier now than it was, but even then you've still got to go through and get that right configuration. So what I want to talk to you about today is three things. I want to talk to you on the GA part, that is admin and settings, the GA4 reports and interface, and then Looker Studios. And this is going to be an hour's presentation in about 10 minutes, so I'm going to go as fast as I can. So most of you have probably logged in and gone to the home page, and the thing that you will all have in common is these menus on the left-hand side. So you've got the reports, the Explore Hub, which is where you can create custom reports, the advertising, which is where you bring in your advertising data, and then the admin right at the bottom, okay? So I'm going to go into the admin section first, and then I'm going to show you a few reports as well. So the first thing is you need the link. So please take a photograph of this, of how you go and find the GA4 setup. Also, if you go to the Annika website, there's webinars right in the top menu, and you just do a search on GA4 and it'll come up, okay? So hopefully you've all got that. So when you go into the GA4 admin assistant, you'll see there's 2 columns, not 3, and that's because in GA3 you had that third profile where you could create a profile for a specific country or advertise or whatever it was. And so what we're looking for here is the assistant right at the top. So that's where you need to go to start with, and then you can, if you haven't already set it up properly, you can easily see what your settings look like. So in this case, this is one that's been set up properly, and what you'll notice is there's a green bar all the way across, and for each of these different settings, there's actually information. Now, if you're not sure, you can, I'll show you in a second, you can check it so that it doesn't automatically do it for yourself and you can control it. So what I'm going to quickly do is just sort of show you some of that setup process. So the first thing you'll notice is that's the linked GA3 account. So you need to make sure at least you've got the two accounts linked correctly. But I'm actually looking in GA4 at this now. And then these are all the steps. I think there's 8 altogether that you have to do. And so these are the configuration steps that you go down one at a time. Now, when you first start, you can just about see it. There's a little green bar on the left. And what you'll see is nothing is set up. So if you've not done anything, it will look like this. And then what you do, as you go through each of those stages, you'll gradually go over until, so each of these you click on, and you can either import things or you can check different things, and then, or you can leave it so you don't change it at all. And then by the time you've finished it, you will then get a green bar. So this is an example, so start data collection, and then so this one is showing me the fact that the pixel's not installed at all. So the first thing you need to do is you need to go to streams in the admin, data streams, and go and get your measurement ID, and then either put that into something like Google Tag Manager, or a plugin within your website. So if you've got something like Shopify, then you take that measurement ID, and then that will make sure that the pixel is actually tracking properly, and that's the first step. And then you basically go through each of these steps one at a time. So this is import your conversions from Universal Analytics. And actually, when you get to the next stage, you can choose which ones you want to import. So don't import everything, because some of it won't be working, or you don't need them anymore. But if you don't want to do it manually, and if you want to do it manually and you don't want to import it, then you just mark it as complete. And so when you get to the end, it doesn't just bring everything across and make a right mess. So that's definitely really important, the conversion side. And then the other one that's really important is linking it to your Google Ads account. Now, the reason this is so important is most people don't get round to setting up proper Google tracking code on their accounts. So what they do is they import their analytics data as their conversions. So if you've got an e-commerce website, you bring in your analytics data rather than setting up a data layer and setting it up properly. Now, if you go and look into your Google Ads, what you'll see in the conversion section in the big menu at the top is whether you've got GA3 or GA4 as being your primary conversion. Now, you really need to swap that to GA4 now, because particularly when you've got automated ads like Performance Max, you might not be bringing in any data anymore, and then basically your ads will break. So it's really important that if you're running ads, that you get this bit set up. But again, if you want to do that manually, you can mark it as complete. So I won't go through any more of the configuration settings, but what I will show you is that once you've finished it, you get the green bar all the way across, and then these are all green as well, and then you've done all the steps. But in some cases, you've marked them complete because you intend to do them manually rather than letting the system do it all for you. Okay, so the other area that you need to go into in the admin section is the settings, and this is down here. And there's a whole load of settings. I'm going to just give you some examples. So one of the first settings that you need to do as soon as possible is what we call data retention. So you can see here, there's a load of sub-menus, and data retention is there. So the default is 2 months, and you need to change that to 14 months, because otherwise the cookies will expire, and you won't know whether they're a new user after or a returning user after 2 months. So that's the sort of thing that you need to swap. Another example would be, another example within data streams is actually if you go in and click on your website, which you should see in here. So if I click on this one, there's a whole load of additional configuration settings hidden within data stream that you just don't even realize they're there. Now, data streams are used for things like if you've got your website, if you've got an app, you'd have one for each of them. And the whole point of GA4 is that it can manage both. So if you click into there, this is where you find your measurement ID, which you need to set up for doing the tracking in the first place. It's also where you bring in a load of enhanced conversions or enhanced events, because Google Analytics 4 works on events, things like a page view is an event, a scroll down the page is an event. So all of those things are classed as events, and then you can decide whether you want to make them a conversion or not. So what you can see is that there's a whole load of settings here that are really hidden away. So when you first come to GA4, I mean, I just didn't even realize all this stuff existed until, somebody taught me about it. And so you can see that once you're in this section, you can go down into the configuration and go and find a load more really important settings. So a good example would be that in GA4, it measures engaged visitors. So currently it's set at 10 seconds. Well, to me, 10 seconds is somebody coming to the page, thinking it's rubbish and clicking the back button, whereas actually you want somebody to be there for at least 30 seconds. So you can do things like that and change all those things. So I apologise that I haven't got long enough to show you more of the setup, but I just wanted you to get an idea of where you would go and get an understanding that it's like a massive pyramid or iceberg. You just see the tiny bit at the top, and underneath there's a lot more stuff that you need to understand. So as marketers, most of us will be interested in the reporting section, which you can click into. And one of the things that people don't understand is that actually this is completely customizable. But the problem with GA4 is that the standard reports are a bit rubbish. For example, this report, acquisition, if you've used Universal GA3, I go in there every day and I'll look and I'll change the duration, I'll change it to month or week. You can't do any of that in there. You can't even see all sessions. You only see this one by channel. So this is an example of a report that just isn't very good. And if you want to make your own report version of this, you have to go into the library or into the explore function to create your own custom report. But this is the sort of thing that you would definitely see. And what you will notice is that they're making it really obvious that direct is the dumping ground now. A lot of the traffic that comes through direct isn't because they clicked to your website, typed the URL in. It's probably because they've been on a mobile or they've come from a PDF or something like that, and it's not trackable. So you'll notice here you get unassigned. You also get something called cross-channel network. If you see that in analytics, and you think, what the hell is that? It's actually performance max ads. So if you're running Google Ads and you suddenly see cross-channel network, that is the performance max ad. You can work it out because you can then do a secondary dimension and say something like campaign, and you'd find out. This is another one where I've gone right down to the bottom. This is users, and I've gone for demographics, and I've gone for location. But a lot of the metrics are quite frustrating because you get user-based metrics and you've got session-based metrics. So the user source is the way they first came in on their first visit, but the session source, source, medium, source, campaign, channel, whatever it is, based on the session, is all the ones that happened later. So when you're trying to create reports or when you look at the metrics, they are different from what you're used to in GA3. This is something that most people don't know that exists. It's the library. And the library allows you to do a few things. You can customize your menus. So if I bring up life cycle, that's a direct match. Users are a direct match. But business objectives, they haven't included that, so it's not published. But you can also create new menus. So a lot of them are things like Search Console. That would be a classic menu that you can add. And then down here are all the individual reports. But notice you can create your own report there. Now these reports are reasonably simple, and this bit of the program is dead easy to use. So if I just wanted to see revenue versus sessions, I can create that really easily. Whereas if I go to the Explore Hub, I need a PhD to work out how to use it. And it takes quite a lot of tracking and training and playing around with before you really get to understand it. But I do recommend that if you want to create any new reports, this is probably your first starting point. However, it is limited. So my view with all of this is use Looker Studio. So Looker Studio or X Data Studio is really a lot easier to use. And I have got a free template to give to you later on. But basically, there's so many problems with GA4 reporting that you really need to look at something else. So I've got a couple of reports where I do GA3 and GA4, exactly the same data. And I just wanted to show you what it looks like when you put them next to each other, because they don't attribute in the same way. The metrics are different, and so you really, it takes quite a lot getting your head around the differences. So on the left, what I've done is I've pulled in the GA3 data and the GA4 next to each other just to show you that sometimes it can be out by 10, 20%. So if you're, and that's just because they're measuring it in different ways. So on the right-hand side, using something called the blended table features in within Looker Studio, I've actually got the data from my GA3 account next to the data from my GA4 account, and that's allowed me to plot the sessions, and you can see that they were really late in setting up their GA4, but actually when the months overlap, they're reasonably close, and that one there where you've got both is actually this data here. So if you're interested in a free GA4 Looker Studio report, if you fill in this form, we can send you one over. It's quite simple. It's you have to copy it, and then you have to change your the actual sources of the data. So, for example, we would use a standard. There's an analytics demo account that Google provides. So you would edit that and change it to yours. So that's how you would implement it. And then if you haven't got it set up or you need some help, then of course we can help you with that as well. Okay. I've got 10 minutes left to go through the last two sections, and the reason I changed the presentation to give more stuff on GA4 was because I was just shocked every time I've audited an account at what a mess they're in. And this is I'm talking about some reasonably sized companies, so most people are getting it wrong. So I thought it was really important that everybody has that education that I've benefited from in the last month or so. So why do we want to look at server-side tracking and conversion APIs? So how many of you have got server-side tracking implemented already? Okay, somebody really keen to tell me at the back. That's less than 5% of you, okay? So what it is all about is trying to overcome those problems that you get with iOS 14, to a certain amount of JavaScript blocking on your browser, and then all the cookie blocking that's going to happen going forward. So what we're trying to do is provide data, particularly to advertising platforms like Meta, particularly on where a lot of the advertising happens on mobile, so that the information comes from your server and bypasses all that browser blocking that we're seeing. And by doing that, and quite a lot of the platforms have now got it, so Pinterest, TikTok have got it, Google's got something called enhanced conversions, which is pretty much the same thing. By implementing server-side tracking and conversion API, particularly if you've got a Shopify site, even if you've got a bespoke site, there's various tools that you can use to set it up. And it takes us about half a day to a day to set that up for clients, and then there's an ongoing hosting charge. So what does it mean? So this is what it looks like now. So if you've got the client side and you've got the client's browser, those third-party tags or pixels, whatever you want to call them, cookies, they're sending information over to Meta or Google or Pinterest, whoever it is. But when you come to a server-side version of this, what's actually happening is not only will you still send some stuff via the browser if you've got it, but you use the server, and then that is used to send the information over. So there's two parts of it. First of all, there's the server-side tracking to collect the conversion data, and then you've got the conversion API to plug the information into Facebook or whatever platform it is. So the main reason why there's benefits is because the tracking is happening on the server side, it can actually speed your website up. It does mean that you recover a lot of data, and which means that when the actual algorithms of Facebook for conversion-based objectives, suddenly it's working again after 3 years of it not working at all. And it's really useful for things like if you're going to do profit-based bidding, which means that you can actually bring the value of the sale and the margin from your thank you page or your web cart page, and use that for things like Google Ads bidding. So just to try and explain what it looks like, this is quite a simplistic diagram, and to be honest, you can use plugins to overtake this, but if you look at it from a point of view of how you probably would do it now, as soon as somebody arrives on your website, there's going to be a server request for the information. And if you're using Google Tag Manager, all those tags are going to fire and send the information over to Facebook or Google or Google Ads, etc. Now, what happens when you use the server-side tracking? That can still take place, but more likely what's going to happen is you're going to have a server-side version of Google Tag Manager on your or on the server side, and then the information will go from the client side over to Google Tag Manager on the server side, and then that's sent over, okay? So this was the only way I can explain it in easy to understand language, so hopefully that's okay. CAPI is similar, but the difference is, this is probably a similar way of showing the same thing. So what currently happens is that pixel sends it over to the Meta servers, and then if you're in the Meta Ads account Business Manager, then you will get that, you will get only about 10% of the conversions. So most people have stopped doing conversion objectives because that relies on conversion data for your website to see if it's working. So what they tend to do is do brand advertising, lead generation, engagement type metrics, because all that data is already in Facebook rather than the conversion data that you've got in your website. So if you can get the data from your server over to Facebook via the conversion API, and then suddenly you get all that data back, okay? So we did this work for Books to Door, and we won 4 awards at the UK Paid Media Agency, and I'm hoping we might win some more tomorrow night, because we're in for another 3. And we got a real hockey stick growth, where they went from spending about £5,000 a month to something like 20 to 50,000 a month, because the results were so good, and the ROAS was better as well. Okay. Quickly in the last few minutes then, a little bit on automation and redundancy of keyword targeting. If you saw my other presentation, I did cover this as well, but basically, if I bring this up, there's 3 main ways that Google will set up a campaign for you. You can use key phrases, which is the traditional text ads. We can use the content of your website or product feeds. So that feeds things like dynamic search ads, or paid SEO as I call it. Standard shopping ads, which are the old ones, which still have value at the moment until they phase them out. And then these new performance black box, AI-driven Performance Max, which can literally have shopping, video ads, search ads, everything. You know, it's the sort of the place where they can sell the maximum inventory across all their platforms. And also you've got no idea what's going on, so therefore it's quite difficult to optimize it. The other thing you can do is you can use audiences and other indicators like for display and YouTube, etc. And Performance Max does that as well. So although the 2 on the right, you don't actually bid on key phrases, you do get the search data in the search terms report. Performance Max is a bit rubbish, although they are improving it because everybody's complained. But that search data is really powerful because you can optimize your current ads, but what you can also use is in other platforms. So if you think about, you can get PPC conversion data within a couple of days or a week from Google Ads. But if you were optimizing that key phrase, it might take you 6 months to get an SEO. So what you can do is focus your SEO strategy on the key phrases that actually you know convert. And you can also use it for things like Amazon ads as well. So that data is really powerful and can be used in lots of places. The other thing that I think is going to happen is that as Google makes key phrases less and less important. They're effectively going to get you to the point where you just say what your website is and what your objective is, and maybe give a few tweaks on the audience, and they'll just do everything for you. I dread the day, but that's probably going to happen. So what I think is going to happen is your website will become effectively the indicator of what you want to be found for. So if you've got a crappy website and you haven't done any SEO, effectively you're not giving SEO signals about what your website's about. It's not going to work in PPC either. So what I think is going to happen is that what we're going to have to focus on is making sure our website works. That means the product feed will work, and then actually you won't need to find key phrases anymore. So I'm predicting that what's going to happen is that SEO and PPC teams are actually going to have to work together. I mean, ours do, but so many other companies, they don't work together at all. And the tactics will start to converge. So if your PPC team and your SEO team never talk together, they don't use the same tools, they don't share data, you're missing a trick, because I think within 12 months, I think they'll hold out on search text ads for a little bit longer, but I think basically everything will become automated and you won't need key phrases anymore. So you heard it here first. So finally then, key takeaways. So GA4 will have replaced GA3, but you may not have got it set up correctly, so go and fix it. Use that webinar to try and improve the configuration. The other thing you need to be aware of is the data is different. So you might find that you don't get the same information, and to be honest, some of the standard reports are rubbish. So I would definitely recommend, if you haven't already taught yourself how to use Looker Studio, we've got a couple of webinars on that from last year. Definitely have a look, because it will fill in the gap. The privacy shift, which will get worse, not easier, is going to mean that there's going to be less visibility of customers' data and conversions. So you really need to be looking at server-side tracking now. There are, a few months ago, it would cost us something like £3,000 to set up a bespoke website. We're now down to sort of £500 and a few £100 a month, and even in some cases less than that. So you've gone from a situation where it was a bespoke, highly technical project to something that is much more productized almost. But you'll get so much benefit from it. I mean, if you can increase your conversions through Facebook by 600%, then you're going to make money out of it. I definitely think the automation that we're seeing with Google, with shopping ads, DSAs, and Performance Max, it's going to mean that site content is going to be critical for your paid strategy as well as your SEO strategy. So if you can integrate the two, you can get the best of both worlds. So finally, a little bit of an ad. If any of you are based in the Midlands, or you can get a trainer, we've got a conference next week on integration and automation. It's our 8th conference. We've got people like SEMrush speaking, Interflora there, and there's 10 speakers altogether doing various amazing, a lot of my favourite speakers. I always pick the speakers I like to listen to. The tickets are 75 quid, including a hot lunch, and the profits go to our local charity. So if you're interested in coming to talk to us, we're over there. You can pick up one of these, and thank you very much.